That quiet stretch of nothing between you and a narcissist is never really nothing at all. It has weight. It presses down on your chest and it hums in your ears. And it isn't simply the disappearance of texts and calls. It's more like a presence that moved into the space they used to fill, and now it just sits there, breathing. You can feel this stillness the second you wake up, before your eyes even open, like something sitting on your sternum. And it's still there when you finally drift off at night, once the rest of the world has gone quiet and there's nothing left to distract you from it. Your mind gets trapped in an endless loop, replaying the same painful question again and again. Who's really hurting more right now, you or them? It's the question that follows you when you wake up, lingers throughout the day, and refuses to leave when you're trying to fall asleep. Every quiet moment becomes another opportunity for your thoughts to circle back to the same mystery. Are they missing you? Are they suffering the way you are? Or have they already moved on as if none of it ever mattered? Meanwhile, you're carrying the weight of unanswered questions that seem to multiply with every passing day. You find yourself drowning in an endless flood of why, how, and what if. Why did things change so suddenly? How could someone who once seemed so close become so distant? What if you had said something different? What if you hadn't made that mistake? What if they're waiting for you to reach out? Every possibility creates another emotional spiral, leaving you exhausted but unable to stop searching for answers. At the same time, the silence on the other side feels almost unbearable. From where you're standing, they appear completely untouched by everything that happened. They go about their life, they post online, they laugh with friends, they seem productive, calm, and unaffected, while you're left questioning every memory and every conversation. It can feel deeply unfair, as though you're carrying all the emotional weight while they escaped without a scratch. But appearances can be incredibly misleading. People process emotional pain in very different ways. Some wear their heartbreak openly, while others bury it beneath routines, distractions, work, or emotional distance. Just because someone isn't expressing their pain doesn't automatically mean they aren't experiencing it. And just because you're feeling everything so intensely doesn't mean you're the only one affected. The truth is that emotional suffering isn't a competition, and it rarely unfolds on the same timeline for two people. One person may feel overwhelming grief immediately, while the other stays emotionally numb for weeks or even months before the reality catches up with them. Someone who seems perfectly fine today may face their deepest emotions much later, once the distractions fade and the silence finally settles in. If the other person has an avoidant attachment style, this difference can become even more confusing. Avoidant individuals often suppress painful emotions rather than confronting them directly. Their first instinct may be to create distance, focus on independence, or convince themselves they don't need anyone. From the outside, this can look like they don't care at all. Internally, however, their emotions may simply be delayed, compartmentalized, or hidden behind psychological defenses they developed long before they ever met you. What you do know with certainty is your own experience. Right now, your pain feels real because you're allowing yourself to feel it. You're confronting the loss, the uncertainty, and the unanswered questions instead of pretending they don't exist. As overwhelming as that feels, processing those emotions is often the beginning of genuine healing. The hardest part is accepting that you may never receive a complete answer about what they're feeling. Your mind wants certainty because certainty feels safer than ambiguity. But healing rarely comes from finally discovering whether they miss you more than you miss them. It comes from gradually shifting your attention away from trying to solve their emotional world and back toward understanding your own. Instead of asking, who's hurting more, a more empowering question becomes, what do I need today to hurt less? That single shift changes the direction of your energy. Rather than chasing invisible answers about someone else's heart, you begin rebuilding your own peace one step at a time. Ironically, that's also when the silence loses its power. Whether they're hurting deeply, barely hurting at all, or somewhere in between, their emotional state no longer determines your ability to move forward. And that is the moment you begin reclaiming something far more valuable than answers. You begin reclaiming yourself. But here's what you need to understand. This was never just a breakup. What you're living through right now is a kind of psychological standoff, and if you can see it clearly, you'll never look at them or yourself the same way again. Right now, your own body feels like it's turned against you. You'd think that getting away from someone who hurt you this badly would feel like relief, like finally being able to breathe. But in these early days, it feels more like suffocation. That's not freedom you're feeling. That's withdrawal. Your relationship was never built on steadiness. It ran on an exhausting, high-stakes cycle of unpredictability, where one day you were everything to them and the next you barely existed. That kind of hot and cold treatment does something genuinely damaging to a person's brain. It trains you to crave the rare moments of warmth like there's some kind of reward. Your nervous system stopped looking for safety and started chasing the hit of their approval instead. What you had wasn't really a partnership. It was a loop of hope, rejection, and punishment that your body got chemically hooked on. Because of that conditioning, peace doesn't register as peace to your nervous system anymore. It registers as danger. Now that the contact has actually stopped, your brain isn't relaxing and thinking, finally, we're safe. It's panicking, asking where the source went. That's why you keep catching yourself checking your phone, scrolling back through old conversations, or staring at their social media like it holds some kind of answer. Your brain is hunting for the chemical hit it got used to. There's a real physical ache in your chest, a restlessness under your skin, a low hum of anxiety that won't quite switch off. It's tempting to read that pain as proof of some deep soulmate-level connection, but be honest with yourself. That's not what this is. What you're feeling is the evidence of a trauma bond, not true love. Think of this period of silence as a kind of detox. When someone with an addiction stops using, their body doesn't just calmly adjust, it revolts. They sweat, they shake, they can't sleep. And for a while, it genuinely feels like dying. Not because the substance was ever good for them, but because their system hasn't yet relearned how to run without it. That's exactly the phase you're in right now. This is the ugly, uncomfortable part of getting emotionally sober. Every single time you resist the urge to text them, every time you set the phone back down, every time you breathe through the panic instead of acting on it, you're pushing more of that poison out of your system. It might feel like you're falling apart, but you're actually putting yourself back together. The pain is real, but it isn't a sign to turn back. It's a sign that the healing has already started. You have to move through the storm of withdrawal before you can reach solid ground again. While you're sitting in that silence trying to hold your heart together, understand that the person on the other end is experiencing something entirely different. It's tempting to picture them in their own space, feeling the same crushing weight you feel, maybe even replaying their mistakes, maybe missing you the way you miss them. But you have to be honest with yourself here too. Their silence isn't grief. It isn't some private mourning period. For a narcissist, silence is strategy, a tool used to protect their image and manage how they're perceived. They're not looking inward trying to heal anything. They're looking outward, gauging who's still paying attention. Their whole sense of self depends on having supply, a constant stream of people orbiting them, making them feel like the center of the universe. To them, your emotions, whether it was love or tears or justified anger, were never really about you. They were fuel. As long as you kept reacting, they kept feeling powerful. So when you go completely silent, you're not just ending a conversation. You're tearing up the script they've been relying on. At first, this silence doesn't scare them. If anything, it makes them arrogant. They tell themselves a story where you're just being overly emotional or dramatic, that you're sitting somewhere staring at your phone, waiting for the tiniest scrap of their attention. They might even take a strange kind of pleasure in it, imagining you suffering because in their distorted logic, your suffering is still a kind of tribute to how important they are. They expect the same old pattern to repeat. They pull away, you chase, they go cold, you scramble to fix it. They're waiting for that predictable moment when you break down and send the long message or make the late night call. To them, your struggle is confirmation that they still have a hold on you, and that sense of ownership keeps their ego propped up. But something shifts once days stretch into weeks and you still haven't reached out. That's when they run into something far scarier to them than being hated: the wall of irrelevance. A narcissist can survive being disliked. They can even feed off it in a strange way because being the villain in your story still means they're the main character. What breaks them is being nothing at all. Once you stop checking their profiles, stop asking around about them, stop reacting to their little provocations, you become a mirror, reflecting their own emptiness right back at them. Without you there to admire them or respond to their cruelty, they're forced to sit alone with a version of themselves they can't stand. For someone whose entire identity depends on other people's attention, being irrelevant is basically a death sentence. That's usually when their behavior gets erratic or suddenly very performative. They're not moving on in any healthy way. They're scrambling to fill the space you left behind. The silence pushes them into image management mode. Maybe they start posting an exaggerated version of their amazing new life. Maybe they jump into a new relationship at lightning speed. None of that is happiness. It's an attempt to convince themselves, and you, that they're still the one calling the shots. They want a reaction, any reaction. If they can't earn your love anymore, they'll happily settle for your jealousy. If they can't get your attention, spite works just as well. But if you give them nothing at all, that silence eventually forces them to confront the one truth they've spent their whole life avoiding. Without someone to control, they don't actually know who they are. Your silence is the boundary that truly disarms them, and it's important to understand the difference between someone who's genuinely at peace and someone who's simply putting on a performance. Once it sinks in that you're not coming back to play your part, their ego takes a serious hit. And that's usually when they pivot from silence into full performance mode. All of a sudden, their life looks like a carefully produced highlight reel of happiness. None of it is real healing or reflection. It's a show, staged for an audience of exactly one you. They start curating a version of reality specifically designed to make you feel like the problem and to make themselves look like they're thriving without you. You might notice them posting more often than usual, flashing smiles that never quite reach their eyes, surrounding themselves with new faces just to prove how easily you could be replaced. Don't let the show fool you. This isn't growth, it's a desperate act of self-protection. One of the more common tactics during this phase is the smear campaign, where they start quietly rewriting the story of your entire relationship. Because they can't tolerate the shame of being the one who got left or ignored, they need to make you the villain instead. They'll tell mutual friends, family, anyone who'll listen that you were unstable or toxic or simply couldn't hold it together. This isn't about processing what happened. It's damage control, meant to discredit you in advance in case you ever speak up. If they can convince people that you were the problem, they get to play the long-suffering victim finally finding their freedom, and they never have to sit with the truth of what they actually did. Then, almost inevitably, comes the new person. From the outside, it can look like they've moved on impossibly fast. It might feel like a gut punch to see them with someone new just weeks after everything ended, and it's easy to start questioning whether the years you gave them ever meant anything real. But here's the truth. A narcissist doesn't move on. They replace. This new person isn't really a partner to them. They're a prop in the ongoing performance. The narcissist needs someone new immediately because they can't tolerate being alone with their own thoughts. And this new relationship isn't proof of love. It's a distraction from the emptiness underneath. In a way, they're using this person to send you a message. Look how easily you were forgotten. But real peace doesn't need to prove anything. People who are genuinely content don't feel compelled to broadcast it or use someone new as a tool to provoke jealousy in an ex. The louder the performance gets, the more it actually confirms that your silence is working. Someone who's truly at peace doesn't need an audience for it. Indifference is quiet. Real peace doesn't come with a soundtrack or a headline. So when you see them acting out or flaunting their new life, what you're actually witnessing is a person in a state of quiet panic. They know how to handle your anger, your tears, your pleading, even your rage, because all of that still puts them at the center of your world. What they have no defense against is your indifference. Nothing dismantles their ego faster. By simply refusing to watch the performance, you cut the power to the whole production. Without your attention keeping it alive, the act collapses, and they're left facing the one thing they've always feared most, themselves. Every day you hold that silence, something quiet but genuinely powerful is happening in your body. You're not just getting through it, you're literally recalibrating your nervous system from the ground up. For a long time, your body was wired for chaos. You were living in a near constant state of alert, scanning for the next shift in mood, the next criticism, the next disappearing act. So when the chaos finally stops, that new calm can feel foreign. It might even feel wrong at first. Real stillness can seem boring, or honestly, kind of terrifying when you've spent so long braced for an explosion that never seems to come. That's because your body has genuinely forgotten what peace feels like. But if you stay in that stillness long enough, the noise starts to fade. The heavy fog that's been clouding your thinking for months, maybe years, begins to lift. And for the first time in a long while, you can actually see clearly ahead of you. As this recalibration continues, you'll start noticing small but meaningful shifts in how you move through your days. You'll make an ordinary decision, what to eat, what to wear, what to watch, and suddenly realize you didn't stop to guess how they'd react to it. You didn't run it through a mental filter of their approval first. That tiny bit of autonomy is actually a huge win. It's a sign that you're finally back in charge of your own life. One day you'll catch yourself laughing at something, a joke, a video, whatever, and the sound of your own laugh will genuinely surprise you. You'll realize it's not a nervous laugh meant to smooth over tension, and it's not a performance meant to make things look okay. It's just yours. You're slowly reclaiming your own joy, piece by piece, because the silence has finally muted their criticism. And it matters to understand that the anxious, over-explaining, walking on eggshells version of you that showed up in that relationship was never the real you. That version was a survival adaptation. You were operating like someone in a war zone, and those behaviors were your armor. You became hyper alert because you had to. You made yourself small because that was the only way to stay safe around them. But you're not in that environment anymore, and you don't need that armor now. It might feel like you lost yourself somewhere along the way, but the reality is more hopeful than that. The real you never actually left. She or he was just drowned out by the constant noise of their needs and their chaos, quietly waiting for the world to go still enough to be heard again. In this silence, your own inner voice finally gets the room it needs to speak. For a long time, that voice was barely a whisper, buried under layers of gaslighting and self-doubt. But the longer the silence holds, the clearer and stronger that voice becomes. You start trusting your own instincts again. You start remembering what you actually enjoy, what you actually value, what you actually deserve. You're not becoming someone new. You're returning to who you were before you were taught that you had to shrink yourself to be loved. This return to yourself is honestly the most powerful part of the whole healing process. It's the moment you realize the narcissist didn't destroy you. They just took up residence inside your life for a while. Now that they're gone, you get to rebuild on your own terms, this time on a foundation made of your own truth instead of their lies. Be ready, though, because silence rarely stays unbroken forever. If they come back, and let's be honest, they usually try, it won't look like the version of them you remember. They're not going to show up looking like a threat. They're going to show up looking like the answer to everything you've been missing. They've spent months, maybe years, learning exactly which of your weak spots to press. And they'll come back saying precisely the words you've been aching to hear. They might seem unusually soft, unexpectedly remorseful, maybe even tearful and vulnerable in a way you've never seen before. They'll bring up old memories, private jokes, the future you used to talk about, anything that makes the connection feel too meaningful to let go of. This is the real test of how far you've come, and it's the moment you need total honesty with yourself. Hearing the right words is not the same thing as witnessing real change. Being sincere in a single moment is not the same as having transformed as a person. When they resurface, look past the performance and ask yourself, what's really bringing them back? Most of the time, it isn't a sudden realization of your worth or some deep personal reckoning. They're coming back to check the locks. They want to know if the door is still bolted or if there's still a little give in the handle. Their return is essentially a psychological pull, engineered to drag you back into the same cycle of supply. They need to confirm they still have some reach into your emotional life, that they can still make you cry, still make you explain yourself, still make you drop everything for them. If they manage to get any reaction out of you, they win, because to them, even an angry response proves they still occupy space in your mind. They're not seeking a healthy connection with you. They're seeking reassurance that their power over you hasn't run out. Don't mistake a softer tone for a different psyche. Gentleness is just another tool from the same toolbox. It's easy enough to fake softness for a few weeks to earn your trust back. It's nearly impossible to fake sustained, deep accountability over time. Genuine change is slow and uncomfortable and requires someone to fully own the fact that they were the one causing harm. And that kind of admission is exactly what a narcissist's ego is built to avoid at all costs. If what they're bringing you isn't a consistent track record of real effort, professional support, a genuine shift in behavior, and total respect for your boundaries, then what you're looking at is the same old pattern in new packaging. Without real internal change, any reconciliation will burn out faster than before, and the eventual collapse back into chaos will hit even harder because now they'll resent you for making them work to win you back in the first place. This is where you have to become your own protector. Choosing not to engage isn't cruelty, it's accuracy. You're responding to the evidence of the past rather than the fantasy of some imagined future. Every time you let them back in before, it led to the same wound, just dressed up differently. Stop listening to their words and start paying attention to their actions. And more importantly, remember their actions from before. If you open that door because of a few carefully chosen sentences, you're not resuming a love story. You're just restarting the countdown to the next collapse. Breaking this cycle for good means understanding that closure was never something they could give you in the first place. It's something you give yourself the moment you decide this is where it ends. Choose your own peace over their potential every single time. Every road with them led back to the same place before, and unless they've genuinely become a different person, the destination isn't going to change either. Your life is worth more than spending it waiting for a transformation that isn't coming. You need to shift how you're looking at this silence because your perspective on it will shape whether you actually heal or stay stuck in the same loop. Stop treating this quiet as some kind of contest, a test of who can hold out the longest, a standoff you win by making them crack first. Because the moment you treat silence as a weapon aimed at getting a reaction out of them, you're still emotionally tethered to them. Instead, think of this silence as your recovery room, a clean, protected space where the door stays locked to keep the infection from getting back in. For the first time in a long time, you've stopped absorbing that daily dose of emotional harm that was keeping your whole system inflamed. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick in the first place, and you definitely cannot heal while the person who hurt you is still hovering nearby. This silence is the only place where you can gain enough distance to remember what real emotional stability actually feels like. And while you're in this recovery space, you need to let go of the idea that you need some final conversation or a heartfelt apology to find closure. One of the biggest traps people fall into is believing that just one more conversation will unlock the truth they need to finally move forward. But be honest with yourself. A narcissist cannot give you the closure you're looking for because their whole survival strategy depends on never being truthful about what they've done. Seeking clarity from someone who consistently lies to you is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The clarity you're craving isn't hiding in their words. It's found in stillness, in staying steady long enough for the chaos to settle and for the truth to finally catch up with you. You don't need them to admit they hurt you in order to know that you're hurting. You don't need their validation for your experience to be real. Closure isn't something handed to you by them. It's the realization that you don't need anything from them ever again. It's also important to stop misreading your own pain. There will be days in this recovery process where the ache feels so intense you'll wonder if you're doing something wrong or think that the pain must mean you should go back and try to fix things. But listen closely. The pain doesn't mean you're failing. It means the attachment is finally breaking apart. Think of it like a broken bone resetting itself. The process of it knitting back together hurts, but that pain is proof of healing, not further damage. The cravings you feel are just phantom sensations from a connection that was never healthy to begin with. Every wave of grief that hits you is just more of that toxicity leaving your system. You're walking through the fire of withdrawal so you can come out clean on the other side. This silence isn't some empty void where your life quietly fades away. It's the fertile ground where your next chapter is actually taking root. Yes, it marks the end of something, but it is absolutely not the end of your story. You're stepping into a new phase of life where the cost of someone else's company is no longer your own self-betrayal. For years, you had to shrink parts of yourself, silence your own instincts, and ignore your own needs just to maintain peace with someone who was never actually peaceful to begin with. That chapter is closed now. By staying in this space and honoring the silence, you're making a quiet but powerful promise to yourself that you will never again abandon who you are just to keep a toxic person close. You were trading a loud, chaotic lie for a quiet, steady truth. And this is where you learn something important. Being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who makes you feel completely alone anyway. This is where you finally come home to yourself.